Hey Poptropicans, it's Captain Crawfish. One of our featured islands for October is Mythology Island. It's one of the biggest and best islands we've ever made, and if you've never played all the way through this adventure, now's the time to change that. I'll show you every step you need to take to beat Mythology Island, and it starts right now. Here on Main Street of Mythology Island, there are a lot of things you can do and a lot of people you can talk to. Because this is such a huge island with so much to do, I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as possible, so you don't have to do it in the order I'm doing things. First thing I'm going to do is go into this museum where I see a little backstory about the gods of mythology and their battle against the Titans. This is pretty cool and I recommend checking it out. So it looks like there's a little family tension there between Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. One thing we can do right now is pick up that starfish up there on the statue of Poseidon. You don't need to do it right now, but it's right when we start the adventure, so why not? We'll need it later. On the way out, if you ever want to watch that little story bit again, you can press the button next to the door. We're going to head left from here. When you first show up on Mythology Island, you can't go too far to the left or right. If you tried to go left from here, you wouldn't be able to pass. Instead, we'll go straight up and into this tree. We find ourselves in the treetops where there's a little bit of a puzzling platform kind of a challenge to get to the top. You can land on most of the branches. You can also climb up the snakes. These snakes are very quiet. It appears that they have eaten too much honey and have now fallen into some kind of a sugar coma. Up here we'll talk to this, what would he be, a satyr? He's got a challenge for us. If we can find enough honey pots in the time allowed, he'll give us that golden apple. This is not too hard of a challenge here right at the start of the adventure. You have 100 seconds to pick up 10 of these pots of honey. There are more than 10 in the scene, so even if you get stuck way up in the trees like I just did, there's still more than enough time to run through the scene. Just make sure that you try every path available to you. Some of them go behind the leaves and behind some of the other branches. But just keep moving, and before too long you'll have all 10 pots of honey. You can see that even though I'm not doing an exceptional job here of finding all of these pots, I have plenty of time. I still have 60 seconds left, and there we go, all 10. Now I will head back up, and I'm not too proud to admit that I get a little bit lost on my way up this time. It's not only you who might have trouble getting through Poptropica Islands. Sooner or later, we will make it back up to the top, and yeah, bouncy mushrooms. Sooner or later we will make it back to the top, and we will talk to the satyr once again, having found everything that he's looking for. When we do, he reveals a secret passageway to get to the golden apple. You might recall I accidentally found this secret passageway before, but it was no good to me until right now. So we'll just head right up there and then click on the branch to stomp on it and get the apple. Alright. Why were we looking for the golden apple? I'm not exactly sure, but it appears that things are not necessarily what they seemed. Here comes the big guy. Zeus seems a little unhappy that we've been meddling in his domain, but also somewhat impressed by our bravery. So he gives us a task. If we opt not to do it, then all of Poptropica will feel his wrath, and we don't even want to know what that means. So instead, we'll accept the quest. Zeus wants us to find 5 sacred items that are scattered throughout Mythology Island and bring them back to him. Sounds good to me, so let's pick up this scroll here and take a look at the items that we need to find. So open the inventory and take a look. The flower from the garden of the Sphinx, the ring of the Minotaur, a scale from the Hydra, a pearl from Poseidon's realm, and a whisker from Cerberus, which is a multi-headed dog that lives in the Underworld. I don't know about you, but I think we're up to that task, so let's get started. But first, have a conversation with Athena. She's got a bit of a warning about Zeus, which if we were to heed, we wouldn't have an island to play. She tells you that you can click on some olives that hang in trees throughout this quest, and those will give you hints. I haven't done that for the purposes of this walkthrough, but certainly if you need help while you're playing and don't want to reference a video, you can do that. I'm jumping ahead now, going to the right through Main Street, and then the next scene over, the first building is this Temple of Apollo. Apollo, among other things, was the Greek god of music, so I'll pick up a free reed pipe, which I can use out of my inventory. But to learn to play it, I'm going to talk to this statue of one of the muses. And this is the muse of, you guessed it, music. This is a memory game where the muse will play one note, at which I have to play back, then two notes, which I have to play back, and so on and so forth. The sequence is always the same, just adding one at the end. Nevertheless, it gets fairly difficult in my view, so usually what I do is just write it down. So if you have just a pen and a piece of scrap paper, you can write down the colors that she plays, and then instead of having to memorize it, you can just look at your sheet and play the right sequence. This gets to be 8 notes long in total, and once you have done that, then she will teach you a new song, but we have to make it all the way through this first. So in the course of recording this video, I am looking down at my pen, writing down the note sequence, and then looking back up to play it. Another thing to note is that if you do fail this and it comes back up, you're probably going to get a new song the next time. So one note sequence that you might have is going to be no help for somebody else. And if you play the notes that I'm playing in this order, you're certainly not going to beat the minigame. So keep track of what she's playing. Eventually, we'll get to learn this new song. And the good thing about this song is you don't have to memorize this one. This gets put on an item card, and when you need it, you can always just reference it. So we'll head back out of this temple and go to the left this time. Again, you don't have to do this necessarily in the order that I'm doing it. Once you have the reed pipe, you can go to the right of where Apollo's temple was, or you can come this way. So let's go this way for now. When we arrive here in the garden of the Sphinx, it's all dry and the Sphinx is asleep. So we have this environmental puzzle that we need to complete. The first thing to do is simply climb to the top and head all the way over to the left. You'll see the water there. We'll follow the path of the water, and every time it hits either one of these switches or a bridge that you can push down, you'll want to activate whatever it is that is making the water go off, and then you'll redirect the flow. So this is not the kind of puzzle that you need to think all that hard about, but you do need to follow the path of the water the whole way through, throwing these switches and pushing down the bridges until the water makes it all the way down to where the Sphinx is. Almost to the bottom, I think just this one more switch. And now you'll see it's full, the Sphinx is awake, and this flower has bloomed. This is the first of the 5 sacred objects, and because I've played this before, apparently there's a bit of a spoiler there, so I probably should have said earlier. Spoiler alert. It'll continue to say that as I find the 5 sacred objects. Sorry about that. See this door here? Before I go in there, there's one more thing I want to pick up, which is pomegranates from this tree up here. Now the door has this color-coded sequence outside of it. This is indeed a song to play on your pipe. When you open the pipe, the sequence is still visible. Now this sequence is always the same, so you can play it the same way every time without writing it down. Of course, I just went through it so quickly that I don't know what it was. That's why they invented a pause button. In the cave is the Minotaur. The ring in his nose is another of the sacred objects. He won't just give it to us. If we make our way through the labyrinth, then he'll give it to us then. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a trick, but the thing that will help you get through this maze is that you'll carry a golden thread behind you that will always show you where you've been. So if you go the wrong way, which I do to start with, then you'll actually be able to find your way back to where the path forked very, very easily. And that's good because this is a relatively difficult maze. and it might take you a few tries to get through, especially with the chains and the shadows and all that. But there you go, you see where I took the wrong turn the last time, and I think that this is all starting to come back to me now. So I should be able to get through here much faster this time. I thought about, when I was editing this video, speeding it up, but I figured it would help you more if I was going through it at normal speed. Plus it would give me more time to talk to you, and who wouldn't like that? This is kind of a classic puzzle. It says 15 bones of ancient men, take back 6, but still leave 10. The only way it works is if you remove 6 bones so that the number 10 is actually spelled out in letters, not actually 10 total bones. So you've probably figured that out. If not, now you know. We've got a couple more challenges ahead of us in this labyrinth. The first one down here is going to be a dangerous looking scorpion. He will run at you whenever you come near him. So what you need to do is come close enough so that he will run toward you and leave enough space to jump over him. It's not easy, but it can be done. And of course, it's Poptropica. You won't really get hurt by the scorpion. Now, one last challenge. You need to click on the snake with the red eyes each time all of the snakes come out. Now, I know that not everybody out there loves the updated versions of the islands with sound and everything, but that part was 100 times harder in the old version, so it's, in my opinion, huge improvement this time. Having come out of the maze, we just need to talk to the Minotaur, and he grants us the ring, one of the sacred items that we need. Alright, so now we'll head back out and run all the way again past Apollo's temple, now down in front of Hades' temple. You'll notice that it is covered in graffiti. If you talk to this young man here, he will offer to pay you to remove the graffiti. So when you click on each one, just click and wipe the cursor, or if you're playing on mobile, wipe your finger over the graffiti until it's all gone. It's pretty forgiving, but if you miss a tiny spot, it won't register as having been cleaned up. So make sure you get every little piece of it, and then there are 3 total bits of graffiti that you need to clean off of this temple. Alright, so we'll clean up the last one here. I don't know if he really has deathly breath either. I think that's a pretty low blow from whoever did that. Once we've done that, cleaned up all 3, and you can do them in any order, talk to this guy again, and he'll give you a drachma, which is sort of like what $1 is to us, is what the ancient Greeks used for money. Inside Hades' temple, we need to make an offering at the altar in order to open that door. You remember when we picked up the pomegranates? That's what we can use to make an offering to Hades. And when we do, the door will open. And we're in. Once you come into the temple, drop down this dizzying abyss, and you'll land at the beginning of one of the most infamous sequences in Poptropica's history, the crossing of the River Styx. Talk to the boatman to get started, and then you'll enter this mini-game. There are 3 hazards that you need to avoid in this mini-game. The first is a stalactite that will shake and fall. The next is this howling flying skull. And the last is this dinosaur crocodile thing that tries to eat you. These will continue to happen in exactly this order about 5 or 6 times, and you have to dodge each one of them each time, or else you'll probably fall off the boat and have to restart. You can jump over each of them, and they do care about where you are in the boat. So you see I'm moving ahead or to the front and to the back of the boat, depending on which one's coming, and then just jumping over each one. This is much easier with a mouse than with a touchpad. It's also easier than the original version, so that's yet another improvement. It is still, to be totally honest, one of the hardest and most frustrating things that there is in Poptropica, but as you can see, I can make it across, so if you try hard enough, you can too. I do hope that we're near the end soon, and know I'm going through another cycle of this. Jump over that thing. Come on, come on. Hey! The opposite shore. Thank goodness. So on the other side is the three-headed dog, Cerberus. We can't go by him, but remember we learned that song earlier that's going to put him to sleep. This one's pretty easy. Again, you can write down the notes if it'll help you. I find that I'm able to remember this one usually. It's up to you though. The important thing is, once we play it, it'll make this guy go to sleep. There you go. He happily falls asleep. All you need to do is click on his face and get his whisker, which is the third of the magical items. When you leave to the left, you'll automatically come back to the start. You don't need to go through all that stuff again. Ever. And now you can just head right out of Hades' temple. Fortunately for us, Hades' temple is right next door to Poseidon's temple, which is where we want to go next. There is... I wouldn't even really call it a challenge, but in order to get up to where Poseidon's temple is, we need to sort of come out of the netherworld by riding this floating platform that goes up and down on that geyser. This looks like altogether a much nicer place to visit. There's graffiti here too, although we do not need to clean it, so sorry Poseidon, not going to. Once again, we'll leave an offering. This time it's that starfish that you remember we picked up way back at the beginning. Here we are at Poseidon's beach resort, which I would really much rather hang out at than do all this dangerous adventuring. Here is Aphrodite, who will give us a quiz. We have to name each one of these Greek gods. If you remember the museum that we went in on Main Street, it has exactly these images, and every time you click on them you'll find out the name. If you don't want to do that, you can know at least that they always show up the same way. Unlike the pipe game, this you really can just copy what I'm doing. Also, if you want to sort of guesstimate your way through it, you may notice there are certain letters that often show up in these names, and certain letters that rarely do. So if you're guessing, you could do worse than clicking the letters A, T, E, H, N, R, and not things like X or W or F. So just a couple more to name. Hestia, and then a very familiar looking fella with a lyre or a lute or... I don't know. I'll look it up later. Once we do that, Aphrodite gives us something that'll be very helpful, the touchscreen mirror. This allows us to warp to 3 different places, and that'll come up very usefully soon. Down here in the water, you'll notice I have an oxygen meter that is decreasing as I move around. There are all these bubbles floating around, and every time I swim into one, my oxygen meter fills all the way up. So as long as you pay attention, you shouldn't run out of air. If you do, you'll just restart the scene. This is going to be a little maze here, with actually 2 goals for you to accomplish. The first is to swim up here, where this clamshell is opening and closing. You pick up that pearl, and that's another one of the sacred items. And now we'll go into this cave. This is the lair of the Hydra. This is unlike any other boss fight that we have in Poptropica. This one works kind of like a Super Mario Brothers, where when you jump on one of the outstretched heads, it will knock that head out. There are 5 of them, so all you need to do is A, not that, and B, stand close enough until you see one of them tense up to strike you. When they do that, you jump up in the air, and then they'll hold still in the outstretched position for a little while, and that gives you enough time to land on their head and knock them out. Once you've got all 5 of them out, you click just like with the Cerberus and get the Hydra scale. Now that we've done that, we can use our handy-dandy touchscreen mirror. This lets us jump around the island without having to do all that back and forth running. I'm going to click on the lightning bolt. That one takes us to the door of Zeus's realm, which is that big gate that you saw on Main Street. Where we actually want to go is that garden that is over to the left of Main Street to talk to Athena again. Now once you have all 5 objects in your inventory, this conversation will happen. She mentions the clues. Here we have to assemble the clues into a coherent sentence, which again, if you didn't see that weird message on my items, would probably be a massive shock to you. But here comes Zeus. It turns out that he had his own plans all along. So he steals the items and is very open about how he had been using me. So away goes Zeus, and Athena suggests that Hercules will be able to help us. Again, if you had been playing this yourself, you may have talked to Hercules earlier and found him to be kind of a jerk. But after this point in the story, if you go talk to him, you get a different outcome. So we'll go into the restaurant, Herc's Hero Hut, and we'll talk to Hercules. We can just bop right to the end of the conversation if we want to. Now granted, I recommend reading all of the dialogue carefully in Poptropica, but not everybody does. With that mirror, we'll click on the skull and show up in Hades' temple again. Here, Herc will automatically move this boulder, and that allows us to enter this door that'll take us into Hades' throne room. Now, here's one trick for you. Unlike most places in Poptropica, if you don't want to read the dialogue and want to just move right ahead, it's actually the second dialogue option that will give you the item you need. Hades gives you his crown and tells you that you will know what to do when the time comes, which is another way of saying, we'll do it for you when the time comes. Now talk to Hercules and the mirror will come up again. This time click on the trident and it will transport us directly to that underwater maze outside of Poseidon's throne room. Hercules is going to kick this obstruction out of the way, and that clears open a new path. You just have to, don't worry about the oxygen going down, there's barely anywhere you need to go. Just swim down and click into that doorway. This looks a whole lot like Hades' throne room. This is Poseidon. We'll talk to him and use the second dialogue option. This time he gives us his trident. We'll head back out and swim back up to Hercules. Once again, clicking on him brings up the mirror, and we will once again click on the lightning bolt to head back to the gates to Mount Olympus. Here we are. Hercules, being the brawny fellow that he is, smashes the lock off the gate. Now we can finally head to Mount Olympus and face off with Zeus, but not before Hercules is perhaps a little bit overconfident about this pesky snake. Well, at least he puts a positive spin on it. Doesn't sound that great to me, but Hercules and I are two very different people. This guy, whose name I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce, will sell us a bag of wind for that drachma we got earlier. Once we give it to him, he'll hand us the bag of wind, and in sort of a controlled launch, we'll shoot up about halfway onto Mount Olympus. From here, we'll need to run and jump the rest of the way, but it's not too hard, just your typical Poptropica platforming until we reach the top of the scene and can exit upward. So we've made it to the top of Mount Olympus. Zeus doesn't seem to be here yet, although these statues certainly are, and oh, looking like we got ourselves a confrontation. Now here, automatically, the trident and the crown will activate and allow you to grow and shoot lightning bolts. Now the one main thing that I want to impress upon you about this battle is that the little pink clouds on your feet represent your health meter. As long as you have clouds under your feet, you're still in the fight. They will start to get blasted away by Zeus, like with that gust of wind, but other little clouds are floating around. So actually, the main thing you want to focus on in this fight is not necessarily shooting Zeus, but making sure that you always have enough clouds under you that he won't defeat you. Then you can take as much time as you want, you can avoid all his attacks, you can even get hit by some of his attacks, and it won't be that big of a deal as long as you keep your health up. One of his worst attacks is this glowing white thing, because he's invincible during that point, and they'll chase you around the screen. And your lightning bolts will reflect back off of him when that happens. And I have not learned my lesson. So when he's glowing white, you just want to avoid him. When he stops glowing white, you want to chase after him and hit him with as many lightning bolts as you can. Try to stay in the gaps between those lightning bolts, and watch out for when he shoots the gust of wind, because that'll take away a lot of your clouds. But those are all of his attacks, and other than that, as long as you keep your cloud meter filled up, and just keep moving and just keep spamming him with lightning bolts every time he's vulnerable, you'll actually find that he's not as hard as he might seem, although, again, still one of the harder bosses anywhere in Poptropica. I think I've got him on the ropes if I can just stay floating. Stop hitting myself with my own lightning bolts. There we go, I got him. And thus, Zeus is vanquished for the first time on Poptropica, although, as some of you might know, not necessarily for the last time. Much quieter on top of Mount Olympus now. Athena has come up to say hi. Zeus is licking his wounds somewhere. And here, at last, we've got... Love the music, thank you. We've got the Mythology Island medallion. So that's how to play all the way through Mythology Island, one of our 2 featured islands for October. Hope that you enjoyed it, and we hope that you visit Poptropica now to play Mythology Island, as well as many, many other fun and free islands. Farewell.